Excellent. I'm incredibly excited to be back. I'm always happy to talk with the FunnyBizz group. And I know David likes to have me here, particularly towards the end, because I'm an engineer. And he's like, yeah, engineers are always the funniest people. Right? But I am an engineer. Ever since I can remember, I used to like to take things apart and then put them back together again, things like clocks and radios and my parents' marriage. Never got that back together. But I'm an engineer. I'm obsessed with efficiency. I believe the word efficient should be one syllable. And I'm obsessed with things that work. I spent my first few years in the corporate world at Procter Gamble as a project manager. And I learned a couple of things as a project manager there. First, I learned that if someone says, hey, I'll get that to you by COB or close of business, what they really mean is that you'll get that by start of next business day. Right? Because it's always as late as possible. I learned that if you send out a mass email and say, hey, don't hit reply to all, human nature says someone will hit reply to all, which will lead to 100 emails, most of which people saying, hey, stop hitting reply to all. I've learned that. And I've learned that every single meeting should have an agenda and next steps. And I think that David did a great job this morning talking about the agenda of helping people learn how to use humor to make things less boring, right? To improve engagement, to get people to listen. And I think that's what I want to talk about a little bit today is we've had a great session of learning a lot, but the question now is really now what? Right? What are the action steps? What are the action items? What are the things that you're going to do differently as a result of today? Because we learned some incredible things, right? We saw Paul and his incredible dance moves to Taylor Swift. Right? We saw different ways to die, and we had like a fun jingle to sing along with it. We've seen a lot of really cool things, but the question is, what are you going to do differently as a result of being here today? So that's what I want to talk about, because your action item, your next step from the day is to start. And this is a terrible action item because it's so vague and so many people have objections to it. And I work a lot with organizations on how to use humor to be more effective, more productive, that kind of thing. And people often love these types of programs, and then I talk with them a couple months later, and they haven't done anything differently, right? And so I wanted to understand why. I ran a study through my site to see why don't people use humor more at work if they understand the benefits of it. And there's 3 reasons why you guys might go out into the world and not actually use humor. The first reason is that you'll say, I don't think my boss or coworkers would approve, right? Which I understand, because if you go into a workplace where people don't really use humor, you start to think that it's not welcome. But let me ask this. Is there anyone here who doesn't like to laugh? Anyone that's like, no, I hate feeling joy in my body? No, right? Everyone loves to laugh. People want to have more fun. And in one study, they found that 98% of CEOs prefer job candidates with a sense of humor, and 81% of employees say a fun workplace would make them more productive. So people want humor. They want you to actually go out and try and do these things. Right? So it's up to you to kind of go out there and start. And maybe they're not ready. Maybe they don't know about the benefits of humor. So what you can do is, having come to this conference, you can share the benefits of humor. You can talk about how not only does it help from a corporate marketing standpoint, but it also helps from an individual cultural standpoint. Because these are all backed by research, case studies, and real-world examples. I didn't make them up. And if you go to your manager, you go to the CEO, they're going to want you to do these things. Because look at number 10, right? Who's going to be like, nah, we don't want to increase profit here. That's not what we're all about, right? No one's going to say that. But the real thing, the real step that I'll tell you is what I encourage you to do is go out there and start. Go out there and decide to actually try humor. Because I remember my first week of my job at Procter Gamble, my manager gave me this advice. He said that it's better to beg for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. Have you guys heard this before? Right? So I heard this my first week on the job, and I was like, all right, I'm a young college student, right, former college student. I'm going to see if he means it, right? So I started to do things that I thought I might have to beg for forgiveness for, right? I started to include jokes at the end of my emails. I started to teach improv to some of my project teams. And the one thing that I thought for sure I was going to have to apologize for was that I proclaimed myself the corporate humorist of Procter Gamble. I created an internal blog. I created business cards that said corporate humorist. I started writing things out. I started teaching events, all that kind of stuff. And I assumed that eventually someone, probably from HR or legal, was going to come up to me and be like, hey, you can't just create your own job title. Right? But no one ever did. Instead, people just started referring to me as the corporate humorist. Because so many people have this belief of like, oh, I can't try humor, and then they never actually even try it. So I'm encouraging you to go out to actually try humor, give it a go, include it in an email, do it in a meeting, whatever it is, and see what the results are. Because I will tell you that no one has ever been fired because of a bad joke. They've maybe been fired because of an inappropriate joke, but not a bad joke, right? Because a bad joke is something like, I once had to miss class because of hypothermia. I was too cool for school. That's a bad joke, right? An inappropriate joke is one that has an inappropriate subject, or has an inappropriate target, or comes at an inappropriate time, right? As long as we... It's very, very tough being here because I'm a Cavs fan and it's just awful, right? So no. You're up 3-0. Actually, the amazing thing is that I did a conference, probably FunnyBizz last year, and I said, don't worry about it. You guys are up 3-1. Comedy tip is get the audience on your side. Right? So we can make sure that we avoid inappropriate humor by being positive and inclusive. One great thing to keep in mind is the newspaper rule. Newspaper rule says, would you be comfortable with whatever it is that you're doing or trying, showing up in the front page of your hometown newspaper? For your boss to read, your mom to read, your parakeet to read, right? And if you're like, I don't know if I'd want my boss to see that, it means that it's probably not appropriate for the workplace. So you have this kind of sense of checks for yourself of how to use humor. So go out there and actually try it. The other thing that I'll say about this is that let's say you try humor and they say, no, we're not that type of organization, or you don't believe that you can use humor. The reality is that no one can control how you think, right? Even if you work for the 2% of CEOs that don't like humor, no one can control how you do your work or how you spend your day. No one can prevent you from listening to a comedy podcast on your way home so that you relieve stress and show up more present for your family when you get there. Right? No one can prevent you from reading each of your emails in a different accent in your head. And that's what I like to do. Because no one can come up and be like, hey, you're reading emails in an accent in your head. Stop it. Right? They can't control how you think because the reality is that job satisfaction is 100% your own responsibility. Right? It is up to you to find the ways to enjoy your work. Right? So it's a choice that you make every single day. The second reason people say, I'm not going to do humor is because they might say, I don't know how. And yet we've sat through an entire credible day of people talking about how to use humor. But some of you might be sitting in the audience and be like, that's good in theory, but what if I'm not funny? Right? The truth is, if you have ever made someone laugh, even if it's because you trip when going up the steps, and if you have ever made someone laugh, you can create humor because humor is a skill, which means it can be learned. And I know humor can be learned because I am someone who has had to learn how to use humor. I've done over 1,000 shows as a stand-up comedian, improviser, storyteller, spoken word artist. I've spoken or performed in all 50 states in 18 countries and on one planet. I have fans in more than 150 countries based on people who have accidentally come to my website. I've been called hilarious and smart, or at least that's what my mom says. Right? And I've been seen on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart in the audience. But I recently went to my high school reunion, and people found out that I did comedy, and they're like, but you're not funny. And in some ways, they're right, because I would tell you that this is not the face of funny. Right? There's a lot that's funny about this picture. None of it is intentional. Right? I have the blonde tips up top like I wanted to be in a boy band. I'm wearing clothes that are far too baggy for me. The theme was Into a Dream. I am no one's dream in this picture. Right? Because growing up, I was never the life of the party of the class clown. My senior superlative, I was voted teacher's pet. Because I am a type A, blue square, conscientious INTJ with the sign of Aquarius. Means I'm an ambitious, stubborn introvert who likes long walks on the beach. But what I've learned is that we are not our personality assessments, right? A personality assessment might give us insight into our behavior. It might tell us which Disney princess we would be, Pocahontas. But it doesn't define us. Instead, we are defined by our actions. And so if we act as a humorist, if we start to do things like a humorist, we become a humorist. But some of you might not be quite ready to go out and take that leap into trying to write something funny yourself. The other thing is you can take advantage of the benefits of humor simply by being the shepherd of humor, right? Because I did not take this picture. I did not go to Sri Lanka. I do not know this shepherd or any of these goats, right? But I found it on Flickr under a Creative Commons license, and I'm sharing it with all of you, and that's something all of you can do. You can find images on Flickr that you like and put it in a presentation. You can include jokes at the ends of your emails. You can find FunnyBizz videos and share those out. You can hire FunnyBizz to create custom content for your organization. It can all start with just being the shepherd of humor. The other objection some people have about not using humor yet, of not knowing how, is they say, but what if no one laughs? What if I try it and no one laughs? Because that's what we're afraid of, the awkwardness of the moment. Well, first of all, recognize that humor is more broad than comedy. Humor is defined as a comic, absurd, or incongruous quality causing amusement, right? So it's not just about being funny, it's also about causing amusement, maybe making people smile. So here are a couple of examples of, I think, effective humor. The first is from Tire Discounters. Family owned, shut up. No, you shut up. That's pretty good. Right? That's very comedic, very funny. I think it's very effective. Right? The next one is from a job recruiting ad. Are you in the wrong job? Pretty good. Like, look at his feet, just a little hanging there, right? It's very silly, right? Something absurd. This last one is from a physics textbook. Right? And now, this isn't necessarily laugh out loud hysterical, but it is something different, right? If you're flipping through the pages or reading through it, you're actually going to pay attention to what's going on there. So when we're thinking about humor in the workplace, we don't necessarily have to think about making work funny, but instead we think about a way of working that is different, effective, and fun. The other thing is, if you do say a joke and no one laughs, don't dwell on it, right? Because it's the dwelling on it that makes it awkward. And if you're positive, inclusive with your humor, if you say a joke and no one laughs at it, it's now just become a positive, inclusive statement. You're the only person that's going to let them know, like, hey, that was awkward. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that you present that humor confidently. In improv, we say you don't want to present with an apology face. You guys know what I'm talking about? You don't be like, here's a joke I want to try. Right? No one's going to believe that. Try it. Let it go. If people laugh, great. If they don't, just move on. Finally, people say, I don't know how to use humor because, like, what if no one takes me seriously? What if I'm too funny? Right? Well, you want to recognize that using humor in the workplace doesn't replace the work, right? If someone is like, hey, do you have those TPS reports? Right? You don't want to be like, TPS, more like totally procrastinated, sorry. And then if they're like, no, really, do you have those reports? You can't be like, well, see you later, right? Humor doesn't replace the actual work. Humor is like the salt of a meal. You wouldn't eat an entire meal of salt, would you? No, that would make you a horse. Do you want to be a horse? I say nay. The other thing to recognize is that we want to use humor not just as a way to do our work, right? Not just because it's something that we want to do at work, but we also do it as a way we do our work, how we do our work. And people will appreciate that even more. And the way that we can do that is by using our humor map. MAP stands for medium, audience, purpose, where your medium is how are you going to execute that humor? Is it through an email? Is it in a presentation? Is it one-on-one? Audience is who's going to receive that humor. Is it one-on-one? Is it multiple people? Is it someone that you know very, very well or someone that you're meeting for the very first time? And finally, your purpose is why are you going to use humor? Right? As an engineer, this is why it's really important. This is most important to me because we can use humor to achieve specific goals. Specifically, we can use humor as a way to improve communication. In marketing, we can use humor as a way to get people to pay attention, to actually read our emails, or we can use it as a way to help remember things a little bit longer. We can also use it as a way to build rapport with people, build relationships. We can enhance our problem solving, increase productivity, strengthen leadership. And when you use humor for a very specific purpose, people are no longer like, hey, why are you making a joke? They're like, wow, that person is really good at what they do. Right? So we want to make sure we have this purpose for why we do things. The last reason why people will say, I'm not going to use humor is they'll be like, I don't have time. Right? Because it's so easy to come to this conference, to be jazzed about it, and then go out and tomorrow have that deluge of like 100 plus emails that you have to get through and all the meetings that you're going to go to, and you be like, well, maybe a little bit later. But I want to present something to you called scary math. Scary math is this. No matter who you are, what you do, you get 168 hours in a week. If you average about 7 hours of sleep per night, that's 49 hours spent sleeping, leaving 119 hours left awake. If you average about 40 hours a week at work, right, 40 hours, that's 33.6% of your adult awake life spent at work. 1/3 of your adult awake life. And you don't have time to make it more productive, less stressed, and happier. You don't have time to get better results and have more fun. Right? The reality is you choose every single day of how you're going to approach your day. So why not choose humor at work? So I want to pause real quickly here for questions, and then we'll go to this last thing. Because the last thing is your action item is to start. Like I said at the beginning, it's to start. But I want to start first. Any questions? Super quick on any questions. I'll also be around if people have them. Got to get to at least one question, even if it's what's my favorite milkshake. Doesn't matter what it is. One question. Because I have a slide that says questions, so it's like weird if I don't get any questions. Right? Questions there, yeah.
How far did you push the corporate humorist thing? How did that end up?
It ended up very well. The crazy thing is that it improved my brand internally as a project manager because it took me as a one employee out of 110,000 and gave me something unique where I'd go to conferences or I'd go to networking events or I'd go to offsites and they'd be like, wait, Andrew Tarvin, you're that corporate humor guy. You're that guy that wrote the $1 Billion Brands poems with all the $1 billion brands in it. Or you're the guy that like submitted his own jingle for Pringles, right? So it gave me this brand it helped to build, and ultimately it turned into Humor That Works. I started Humor That Works part-time as something that I was doing while at P&G, and then eventually I left to do it full-time because it was something that I saw was working. So that's it. If you have additional questions, I'll certainly be around to share. Because I want to end on one last thing. Quick activity, super quick, is, so I've been here all day, right, towards the end of the day, and normally I'd end on kind of like this motivational kind of story, but I'm an improviser, so I didn't write one. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to improvise one, and I have written down various lines of dialogue that I've heard today from the conference. I've written them on sheets of paper. They're in this cup. I'm going to tell you a motivational closing story and take out pieces of lines of dialogue from the day and seamlessly work them into this particular story. Okay, so thank you. What is something that you're passionate about? Gardening. Oh, I know a great story about gardening. All right, so once upon a time, there was this young girl named Sarah, and Sarah dreamed of being a world-class gardener. She wanted to do everything that she can to be a gardener, but the problem with Sarah is that she was born with no arms. And I don't know if you know this, but it's kind of hard to be a gardener if you have no arms. And so when she went to her mother the very first time to say, Mom, I want to be a gardener, her mother looked at her and said, people make decisions based on what they remember, not what they forget. And some would say the man up above or whoever it is you believe would say that they forgot to give you arms. But it's about what they remembered, and they remembered to give you heart. So I believe in you, Sarah. I want you to be a gardener. So she decided she was going to go and do what she could. So she went to the local community center to take a gardening class. And her very first day, she went up and tried to talk to all the other people. And one of the kids there, he was real mean. He looked at her with her no arms at this gardening class, and he said, these are the results from when I showed up. She was like, oh, because I was so aggressive right up top. And she's like, did that mean he like took my arms, or is like, what's going on? And so she felt self-conscious about herself. And so she left the class. She didn't even go into it. And on the way she was walking home, she saw an old man working in the garden. And she went over to him, and he's like, man, I'm so jealous of what it is that you can do. And he was like, you could do this same thing too. And he took her under his wing. He looked at her, and every single day he told her to come by. And every single day he'd give him the same advice. He would say, Hannibal Lecter was likable, and he ate people. And you don't think you can garden with no arms? And she was like, you are so right. So she did show up every single day, and she worked with that old man on how to garden, and she started to garden every type of different fruit and vegetable, and she created trees, and you may not know this, was the one that created Arbor Day. Because she would go around and she would speak, and she would tell people all the time, I think you should applaud yourself. Because Lord knows I can't do it. I've been Andrew Tarvin. Thank you guys so much.